Yeah, sorry. We just wait on Bevan to get the wine, right?
Yeah.
It's lovely to see you all here. Refreshing change. This is the first in-person event I've attended over the past 2 years, so you're gonna have to bear with me. I'm not used to these friendly faces in front of me, but it's great to be here.
Oh, good. Just good. Intense.
Things off.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Probably 3 days.
No, I'm not.
Oh, yeah, so I'm already okay. Yeah, there's a couple of Yeah. Yeah, I started.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Shannon Karaka. I'm the head of expansion here at Deel for Australia and New Zealand. I'd like to welcome you all to our official Deel launch party. This has been a long journey to get here. We've had to navigate through COVID restrictions and some other internal hurdles, but it's a pleasure to be with you here today in person and a refreshing change. I joined Deel 5 months ago with a remit to build and scale our company in the region. And over that time, I've had the privilege and the opportunity to engage with many different businesses, all different shapes and sizes. And it's been an absolute privilege to be here and to grow the team and to engage and to learn from you all. In tonight's panel discussion, what we're going to speak about is how to build a business without borders. There you go. So I met Shuo and Alex. Briefly. I met Shuo and Alex roughly 6 months ago, and I've had an interesting career. I've spent most of my time working in tech, and when I came across the company called Deel, I was working at WeWork at the time, trying to sell commercial real estate in the middle of a pandemic. As you can appreciate, it wasn't an easy task. And when I came across Shuo and Alex, I had the opportunity to meet with them both, and I walked away from that experience feeling inspired to achieve a $1.2 billion valuation over a 2-year period. Was inspiring at 28 and 30 years old. Thankfully, they like me too, and I got the opportunity to join Deel, and I haven't. And then Deel's overarching value proposition and how we address those challenges as well. Following from that, I'm going to introduce you to Alex, our CEO and founder, to say a few words. And then we're going to kick off our first panel discussion, moderated by Bevan Stevenson, our Global Alliance Manager here at Deel. Joining Bevan will be Michael Savanas from Jobata and Damien from Hybog. Following that discussion, we're going to have a 15-minute break, have some drinks, give you the opportunity to digest the content and what we've spoken about. And then we're going to kick off the final panel discussion, where we're going to address how leaders can build a business without borders. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so 18 months ago, we were hit with a global pandemic. And what's been in the Australian and New Zealand media over that period are all these points up here. The Great Resignation. There's been a lot of speculation and media coverage on the Great Resignation that is looming. We've seen employees demanding more flexible working. In addition to that, we've seen the rise of the contingent workforce as more and more employees or individuals opt to work remotely, opt to work flexibly, and more companies engaging them as well. In addition to that, Australia has seen the largest record year for venture capital investment, rising from $1.9 billion in 2020 to $2.5 billion in 2021. And for Ben in the room, we've also seen the booming cryptocurrency industry. And to the crypto punters here, I salute you. But why is this relevant? What I want to speak to you now about is, I want to share with you a story about Shro and Alex and how they came up with the idea for Deel. So Alex and Shro, back in 2013, were trying to hire some international contractors. And as they were going through that process, they quickly realized how difficult it was navigating tax structures, local labor laws, compliance hurdles. And historically, this has been provided. Historically, if a company wanted to hire internationally, it can be done a couple of ways. The first way is to set up an entity overseas. And for those that have been through that process know how difficult and challenging it can be. The second way is to leverage an employer of record solution. Both expensive and time-consuming processes. So Alex and Shro started Deel on the back of this to address these challenges and issues by offering an easy-to-use platform that enabled companies to hire people anywhere in the world, streamlining the process for hiring, for payroll, and mitigating compliance risk, saving businesses time and money, plus reducing risk. Come on. Cool. Oh. Hey? Oh, there we go. Oh, hey. Okay. Bear with me, sorry. Okay. But why is this relevant to Australian and New Zealand companies? I joined Deel 5 months ago and with a remit to build and scale this company in the region. And over that period, I've had the opportunity to interact and engage with a variety of companies. Some of them are here today. And over that period, I've learned a lot about how difficult and challenging international hiring and expansion can be. I have a newfound respect and appreciation for it. It's not easy, especially in today's climate. Throw in a global pandemic 18 months ago to make matters worse. Companies are struggling to find talent here locally. APAC as a region has had the highest percentage of border closures versus any other region in the world. As a result of this has resulted in skill shortages. It's been commonly spoken about in the media that there is a tech talent shortage. 300,000 workers required to bridge the skill gap. Pre-COVID migration into Australia, approximately 100,000 workers per year. Since then, this has slowed to a trickle. And as a result, we've forecasted APAC as a region, the labour skill shortage of 47 million jobs by 2030. But speaking to the Great Resignation, where employers are offering employees more flexibility. 70% of the global workforce are offering flexible work and remote work as an option. And by the end of 2021, remote workers will represent 32% of the global population worldwide. Oh no. Love this. How did the chicken cross the road? It's okay. All right, new minute now. Hey?
You should hire some remote tech support.
Sorry, I should. All right.
Shannon,
Yeah.
when you say that Asia Pacific had the biggest proportion of total border closures, like, do you mean like in our region, like
In our
countries
region-
shut down more than others?
Yeah, so in our region, 65% of the countries that constitute APAC have had pretty much their borders closed since the inception of COVID.
Right.
As a result of that, Australian and New Zealand companies in particular have felt the burn a lot more. You know, we're siloed from the rest of the world. If you look at the tech talent shortage, I spoke to it earlier, 300,000 workers. Tech talent in Australia as well, because of the short supply, salaries have skyrocketed. We're having all sorts of trouble over here.
It's only a friend.
It's okay, it's the first event we've all been to.
I know. Hey, dusting off the cobwebs. Okay, we good? Okay, so just in summarising the conversations that I've had with companies over the past 5 months, you know, international payroll compliance is a massive challenge. Historically, to hire overseas, you've got your options of setting up an entity, and for those that have been through that process, it is a nightmare. It can take months and months. There are many compliance hurdles to overcome. Every country has their own unique labour laws that are constantly changing. In addition to that, you've got to consider mandatory costs. It can take 3 to 6 months, if not longer. And as an initial step, it doesn't always make sense to do that. The second way to hire is the independent contractor route, which is quick and inexpensive, but potentially risky because of misclassification. Contractors are treated differently around the world. The third way to hire is the employer of record solution, traditionally provided as a managed service, okay? And managed service, usually reflective in the price. It's typically quite expensive to provide that. So speaking to the challenges that I've heard a variety of companies that are struggling through, across these options. And what we do here at Deel is we enable companies to hire people, whether they're full-time employees or contractors, across more than 150 countries in the world. Deel is an international payroll and compliance platform that gives you the flexibility and agility to hire people, regardless of whether you have an entity set up or not. Now, what happens is when a company wants to hire overseas for the first time, the first step is finding the talent, okay? Finding the talent, okay, and say the company is location agnostic. What will happen is they'll come to us and ask, Shannon, can you advise us on where we should be considering a software developer, an engineer, a remote sales team? And what we can do at this point is we can leverage our first-party data and analyze the most common countries in the world for these types of hires. As a follow-up to that, we can provide them with an average salary insight, so that enables them to make a data-driven decision around, okay, this is where the talent is, this is how much on average they're being paid. And we're not a recruitment or an outsourcing company, but if they require recruitment support, which most of the time they do, we can connect them with a local recruitment partner to support that. And when they've found the candidate they would like to hire, We provide them with the infrastructure to legally do it, to hire and pay them. And Deel acts as the employer of record. So what I've seen is, there's been a variety of use cases across companies. Sometimes a company will come to us and leverage Deel as an interim solution. They might be expanding into a particular market, okay? And they need to get boots on the ground. They want to test the market out. Over time, transition their team over to an entity. Other times, a company has deployed a contingent workforce and they want to mitigate misclassification risk. So they'll hire contractors through Deel, and we will mitigate the compliance risk by offering them a solution that gives them a layer of protection against misclassification if it does arise. So that's what we do. We support more than 160 countries. Companies can hire and pay people within minutes on Deel. And summarising, the value to a customer. Payments and compliance from remote teams is what we do. We reduce hiring risk because we are responsible for managing compliance. And what I'm referring to is labour law compliance. When a customer hires someone overseas, we're ensuring that, firstly, they've got a compliant employment contract. If the labour law changes in that country, we also assume a responsibility for maintaining compliance as well. We have an extensive legal partner network around the world. The second component is a simple way to provide payroll. If you consider there's 150 countries around the world, each of them are paid in their own currency. Different payroll cycles, different mandatory costs to be paid as well. What we do here at Deel is we provide our companies a simple way to provide international payroll. We consolidate all of the individual invoices, all of the payroll cycles, inclusive of the mandatory costs. We provide them with a single invoice that they can settle within a few clicks. The final component is what we do is we elevate the employee experience, the customer experience. Deel is a single interface that integrates with Xero, QuickBooks, and that's what we're doing now. What I'm most excited about is the future. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. So, since joining Deel, and Deel was founded, 3 years ago, which is a drop in the ocean. But since being founded, Deel now serves more than 6,000 customers across 160 countries in the world. We service more than 30,000 employees and contractors. And Deel is the 11th fastest growing company in the world. And most recently, we announced our Series D raise, $425 million, which values Deel at $5.5 billion. But on a personal note, in Australia, when I started, we had no customers here. And over the past 5 months, we've grown the customer base to over 100. And the team has grown as well. We've grown from a team of 1 to a team of 15, which is crazy, with a view to grow that to a team of 100 by the end of next year. And this is a reflection in our confidence in the challenges that we solve for our customers on a daily basis. But what excites me the most about Deel is not what we're doing now, but what's coming in the future. We've got strategic acquisitions that are in the works. The launch of our Deel Premium product to help companies mitigate misclassification risk, and our global payroll solution that's anticipated to go live in Q1 next year. So thank you for your time, everyone. Let's have a great night. I'd like to now introduce Bevan Stevenson, our Global Alliance Manager, who is going to kick off our first panel discussion, joined with Damien and Michael Savianas. Thank you.
Woo! Thanks a lot, Shannon. What an experience it is to be in person here today. So as Shannon said, my name's Bevan Stevenson. I'm the Global Alliance lead for APAC here, and I've just flown in from Melbourne 2 days ago. So some could say I've been let out, thanks Dan Andrews. Funny the people in the front here just sort of moved back a little bit. But it does feel like that. It's been a really, really surreal experience to be locked down in a city, or even in my own house for the last sort of 300 or so days. I was saying to a friend the other day, saying there was a United petrol station, a French patisserie, a Woolworths, and a KFC within my 5K radius. So think what happened over the last 300 days to me. I was 85 kilos. But yeah, this has been a really exciting experience to come up here to Sydney, obviously to meet people in person. I joined Deel 5 weeks ago, so that's how exciting it is for me. And I'm also excited to be talking to some of our key partnerships that we're looking to establish here tonight. So I'm going to invite Michael and Damien up to join us. So just a little introduction here. Michael Savianis is the Chief Revenue Officer for this fine establishment that we sit in here today called JobAdder. I'll let Michael talk about JobAdder and the business. And Damien has recently joined as the country manager of another hyperscale HR tech company called Highbob, recently raising 150 million, and Damien taking over the leadership role here to build the business. So thanks for joining us here today, guys. Look, we've got to cover off a few things here, but what I might do is pass over to Michael, obviously because we are here at JobAdder. Why don't you give us a little bit of an understanding of JobAdder, the business, and your role within the company?
Yeah, you got it. Is this on? Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Bevan. And speaking of being introduced, I've known Bevan for 3 years through his previous roles at Sales Tribe, coming across to Deel. And in fact, the reason I got the job at JobAdder was through Bevan. And today's the first time I've actually met him in person. It's just incredible. So yeah, it's a surreal world we live in. As Bevan and Shannon mentioned, I'm Michael Savianis. Where are you, Shannon? Savianis. No worries, mate. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at JobAdder, and I've been here for just on 7 months, and it's been an incredible journey. We've grown likewise. I believe 14 months ago we were 90 people. We're over 200 now globally, and my remit is to expand that team in the UK, across Europe, across Canada, and the US. So, who's JobAdder? Obviously, we own this building, or this floor, which is great. Wish we owned this building. JobAdder exists to make recruitment efficient and joyful for everyone. Bit of a mouthful, but it is exactly that. I mean, if we all look, we're in our organizations trying to hire people, it's hard. It's not easy. Even pre-pandemic, right? It's still hard to find the right talent, attract the right talent, and keep the right talent. JobAdder has been around for about 14 years, an Australian-based company. Has been very successful, particularly within recruitment agencies, and more so within corporates, working with the talent acquisition, the hiring managers, to help find the right talent, attract that talent, and keep that within their company. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll hand over to Lee again.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for having us tonight as well. Great venue. I'm in exactly the same boat with Bevan. So Bevan placed me at Highbob. So if you're ever looking to join an Israeli or a big startup, then go see Bevan.
No longer.
He knows people, he connects people. So look, I'm in a very similar position to Shannon actually. So I've joined Highbob about 3 months ago. Actually, no, it's 4 months. That time is fine. Highbob is basically what we like to call a very modern HRIS platform, right? HRIS is a system that's been around for a very long time, and it has evolved dramatically over the past 20 years in terms of what it actually means and what its drivers are to the business. If you think about maybe the first gen of what HRIS was, it's all about a system of record. We like to talk about that, turning people into binary numbers. Here's your employee code, here's your compliance certificate, off the top. The second generation kind of saw a really big step in evolution to what we call a system of resource. You'll understand there's probably companies like Workday that led that kind of charge. And Workday was really, becoming much more complex, but it was very much built for managers. It was all about giving you insights into departments, into headcount, into where people were located, giving you analysis, easy understanding of what was going on with your organization. What's happened since COVID's come in, and I think generally in terms of how we think about, we manage our people, is that HR has become far more strategic at the head of the organization, and we are now, modern companies at least, are starting to think about putting the employees at the center of the conversation. And so where we see the third gen of HRIS, where we see, Highbob leading the way, is about a system of engagement. And what that really means is, bringing the employee into the fold when it comes to HRIS. It's recognizing for achievements, sharing that with people. It's being able to plot their development paths. It's being able to see where their career paths are going to go, what they're contributing to the company. So we get a really, I hate the word holistic, but it's much more of a holistic picture of your personnel on the ground that's led by actually encouraging them to be part of the conversation. So we're bringing them into that conversation. That's really, I think, resonating right now. You know, all the topics that Shannon talked about before, great resignation, people wanting to work with purpose, you know, companies having to stretch themselves 10 to 30% above average salaries to be able to win that war on talent. All of these things are happening concurrently, and it has just been accelerated by COVID. So, you know, the system that is HiBob is very modern in that approach. It addresses all of those elements, and I think that largely is why, you know, it's been such a success. We're not at 5.6 billion yet, but we did do a $200 million raise. Seek led a 70 million raise in, I think it was 2001, which was great. And part of the reason why we came to Australia, obviously, Seek's a great Australian tech company, and you know, big part of what you know, working with JobAdder, and JobAdder is a Seek company as well. And then recently we got another 150 from General Atlantic. So huge amounts of money going into, you know, global growth, you know, fast forwarding the product, and also into partnerships like with Deel and with JobAdder. And I think what's really nice about the relationship between the three is HiBob always sits in the middle, right? You know, you've got your ATS, which is all about attracting candidates and getting to market really quickly. Your HRIS is about onboarding them really effectively and making sure they're part of the culture and performing. And then, you know, as you're expanding globally, you need to look to companies like Deel so that you can actually spin up really quickly and hire in those regions. So, yeah.
I don't think I could have said it better myself, Dan. Hey, look, thanks for that introduction to your businesses. And there was a couple of reasons why I was interested to come up here to Sydney to help launch Deel here. One was obviously to launch our business, but the second was to get you guys in the room with an audience to collect on the commissions you guys owe me. So, so we'll talk about that shortly. I just want to bring it back to you now, Michael. Obviously, the talent attraction piece is so critical for any company that's looking to hire at this current stage, and JobAdder, you know, really supports companies through that attraction process. JobAdder is an Australian company, being very successful, but now looking to grow globally. What's been some of the sort of key things that you've been focused on as a leader of the business to sort of get into those new markets overseas?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, Bevan. So expanding globally, it sounds attractive. It is attractive, but it's bloody hard. It really isn't easy, particularly if you are based here. How do you do that without being able to travel? So the keys that we found to be successful is finding the right people and leveraging their networks. Internal referrals are just key to be able to bring on good people, right? There's nothing like that. Having those relationships with the agencies, recruitment agencies that you can trust, some of those who are global, to help you expand. Understanding what, from a cultural perspective, how do you bring similar people in other geographies and having them feel that they're still part of the mothership. So there's many different challenges associated with growing global. If you want to do it fast, you want to do it quick, sure, but finding the right people is absolutely key. We've, Shannon, that you mentioned that the Great Resignation, that's all true, right? And you can, some might say it's more media hype than not, but if you think about a couple of interesting metrics, right? Pre-pandemic, attrition rate on average was about 15-16%. Okay, it's gone to between 20 to 40% now. So can you imagine for a 100-person organization, if you're losing anywhere from 10 to 40 people a year, what's that cost you? And it's not just, I've got to go pay agency fees, I've got to do, it's that time. If you're in the sales world, all right, you're carrying a quota. So there's a lot of challenges associated with that. But you know, just to come back to your question, the keys for me is finding the right people to lead that effort and make sure that you maintain that cultural familiarity and make sure that you propagate that to the other places.
That's really interesting points, isn't it? You know, we sort of are so focused as business for growth, and hiring is our MO to get our business growing. But you know, retention is something that, you know, we're losing out the back door and not thinking about, which is obviously why HiBob's had so much success coming in, because you're playing the retention game, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of retention through engagement, right? And I think that's the shifting narrative of the conversation that's happening now. I think I sent you through some stats earlier. We've just done a survey, which will come out shortly. I know everyone's on the survey, but you know, there's some interesting data out there at the moment, especially with all the movement that's going on. And I think what's particularly interesting is understanding why people are moving or what they're looking for when they look to move. I think there's a certain element of people wanting to move after COVID, just something new, right? You know, being locked in your room for 2 years, like Bevan and I were down in Victoria, you know, what wasn't fun, and you come out the other side, you want to adventure, something new to challenge you. But I think more than that, there's kind of a bit of a shift in the way that employees now understanding that they've got the right to actually to work with a company that has a purpose and is a shared purpose for them as well. And that's a really interesting thing, right? Like instead of it just being about the salary and the money, don't get me wrong, the survey results were absolutely about the money, but purpose and the ability to kind of develop and learn within an organisation. These are really fundamental components that are really hard to actually weave into your day-to-day, right? We're all kind of in the sales game, and development comes as a byproduct of your daily interactions with the people that you work with. But when you think about greater development into new roles, into seniority, into leadership, that's a really hard thing to kind of push into your day-to-day when you're constantly chasing the target or the end goal or the next thing that's in front of your face, right? So being able to weave these kind of things into what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis is really important. And that's not just going to be delivered by a system. As much as I wish HiBob would just deliver that as a system, it's going to be the process and internal mindset, and then that's supported by the system as well.
It's really interesting. I mean, working in recruitment for nearly 15 years and hiring fantastic blokes like these guys, and there's other people in the room I've equally spoken about jobs. Recruitment for me, back in the day was very much about hard skills. What are your numbers? Where have you done it before? Where are the proof points? What you're trying to say there is we're now starting to move into this era of soft skills, where we're looking for hiring soft skills. So I suppose the question goes back to you, Michael, as part of the talent attraction. When you're looking internationally with hiring, the biggest issue is how do I even approach it? So if we're now moving away from hard skills to soft skills, is there anything you guys are doing at JobAd that really helped the assessment process with hiring internationally through part of what you do in your product?
Yeah, I'll come back to culture, because again, that to me is the biggest thing that I look for when I'm recruiting. And as I mentioned, I've hired 46 people in the last 5 months. So it's a lot of interviews, right? So the first thing is trust your teams out there to bring the right people in. But the things that I look for, at JobAd, we talk about our 4 values: customer, empathy, innovation, and results. And each of those means something to us, and it's something that every person at JobAd, and there's 200 of us, goes through that same process, and we really drill down to each one of those and assess, is this person, not only do they have the hard skills, but that really, do they reflect and meet those JobAd values? Because that's what every one of us do on a day-to-day basis, just like what you mentioned. I mean, it's so fundamental, right? Because you want people that meet those values, and and not only internally but to your customers, because that at the end of the day is what defines you as a company. So it's a very difficult thing to quantify or say this is the formula, but what your company's values are. The type of people that you want to recruit. Make sure that the people you do recruit follow those values. They get on with everybody a lot better and meet the targets at the end.
That's fantastic. I mean, again, it's hard to understand from an outside in, what company values are and how they've been created, when you're trying to help service the company. But I think, the companies, as you say, the Gen 2s and Gen 3 companies, these HR tech companies are really looking at that purposeful piece really as the key critical thing for not just hiring, but also the retention piece. So coming back to HiBob, Damien, and obviously you're an import into Australia, a company that's come to Australia on the back of capital. Setting up in Australia, how does that work for you, and what are some of the challenges you're facing now as a business entering Australia rather than what Michael's now doing, trying to grow globally?
Yeah, look, I've been pretty blessed on this journey, I have to say. HiBob as a machine is pretty effective. I don't know if anyone's ever worked with an Israeli company before, except for ourselves, but they're so focused. They just know how to kind of enter a market and what to do, and strip back to the things that are important and don't worry about the rest of it. I think one of the things that, I kind of came on about 2 months after they'd hired their first few AEs, and they've been selling from Israel and England. So they've kind of validated the product market fit before I got here, which is great. But look, I think some of the challenges are exactly what what we were talking about before, even global expansion. I'm facing the same thing here, is attachment to the mothership. HiBob and a lot of businesses that we're kind of talking about that we work with are still very founder-led, and the founder is the kind of like it's the magnet that brings everybody together. They're the pinnacle of the culture and the vision and what we're trying to achieve, and that kind of resonates throughout the organisation. Being far away from that is really difficult because you get in trips and drabs, right? You don't have it every day. you don't have that connection. So being able to have open lines of communication, understand when you've got your windows to kind of sync with people and have those conversations, and how you flow that back to your people that you're working with on the ground who might not have the exposure, that's a really important part. So I think hiring that first person on the ground, they have to be really a representation of exactly what it's like, in the other regions, and that comes out of personality, vision, and your disciplines and are they shared. And I always think about your first 15. I think if you can build a really good first 15 team, they create a really solid foundation that you can then potentially make some quasi-bad hires on, and they'll bounce off because you've really established, the way that you think about what you should be doing in market, how the team should operate together, right? What are the principles that we all believe in and share? And if you can hire those first 15 to match that, then I think you really got poised to move forward, and that's not easy, right? Especially in a market like today where everyone is paying crazy money for people with not a huge amount of experience, and people shifting left, right, and center. It's hard to really buy loyalty these days, but I think that's if you can align the values with the people and what drives them as individuals, and if that aligns with what drives you as a manager and as a business, that's usually where you'll find loyalty and the people who are going to stick with you for a really long time. So again, it comes back to digging into those soft skills and understanding what a human is and why they get out of bed in the morning and do the job they do. Is it because I'm coin operated and I want to Lamborghini in 2 years, or is it because I love serving customers and solving problems?
Yeah, some really interesting points there. Thanks for that, Damien. I suppose just to sort of wrap up here, guys, and sort of think about some key things that people in the audience could take away from some of the experience that you've had over the years. What do you sort of think are some of the key things you could sort of share that people should think about if you're thinking to hire internationally or looking to open new markets, or just any of your own pearls of wisdom you could share?
Yeah, probably just reframing some of the things I just said then. Really, if you're looking to go international, look probably through some of my own examples and experiences, but also from what I've heard from lots of people in the industry that I've worked with, is that first hire is really one of the most important pieces, right? It can be incredibly difficult to get that first person to hire remotely and make sure that they are aligned with all the right things that we were talking about before. Sometimes it's much easier to actually have someone from the company go over, and kind of plant the organizational culture that you want them to and build around that.
Which has been a traditional, a legacy sort of structure of the Israeli companies. They normally drop ship somebody out here, they then build that culture around that, but they've struggled to get the local people to work under that same pretense. So there has been a change I've seen in companies not doing that and look at local culture from hiring locally.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just, in terms of how you build out your team, I'm probably of the belief that you build it a little bit slower than you actually want to. Feel the pain of not having the resources that you need to run as fast as you want to early, but hire for quality first, and that sets a really good baseline. It's really easy to want to go really fast and hire 20 people, and I don't know, churn half of them in 10 months.
Yeah, I guess speaking for personal experience, hiring rapidly, like we're in hyper growth mode, hiring so many people overseas, etc. You mentioned a really good point, both of you. Being connected to that mothership. For the last 15 years prior to this role, I was always the remote. I was always working for an American company. I was the smaller guy, right? So I understand that pain of not being connected to that mothership, not having the processes, not having that connection. So what we're doing here is using my personal pain of being that smaller guy, is making sure that the guys and girls in the UK, in Canada, that they feel connected. And it's something that I've seen at Job that we do pretty well. But we're always there for them. We keep emphasizing those values. We use video, so asynchronous communication from a time zone perspective. That helps. Everybody likes a video message from the CEO, for example. It goes down really well. So those are the little things that you can do to keep your teams connected. But Daniel, you mentioned it a few times, is that first hire, that person has to embody those values that you want. Right? It's so fundamental and key, because then everything builds around that.
Guys, really, really appreciate their insights into that. I suppose my takeaway from that, and I'm sure you all have something as well, is sort of, act local but think global. So take that local approach to your business into the international marketplaces and transcend it into those markets. And the people working in those distributed teams, wherever they were, will feel welcome, they'll feel engaged, and they'll feel supported, they'll feel like they're part of the business no matter where they are.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Fantastic, guys. Look, thanks for your time. We're going to have a break now, everybody. So everyone can go out there. We've got an amazing food platter out there. There's so much food to eat, drinks. So we'll connect back here in about 15 or so minutes.
Who's the Channel 7? Oh, she's got a call later as well. With Tom. Oh, Tom. She's Tom's with my sister.
Like, we didn't invite
They found out somehow. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, did you bring them?
All right, everybody. So sorry to bring you back into some formalities. Like, honestly, it is amazing to see the interaction of humans congregating in an area where there's food, wine, and people. So it really is a great experience, and I'm so grateful that you're here to share it with us. So the formalities from here on, we've invited an amazing panel of speakers up here tonight. Please excuse our late entrant here, Mr. Colin Klein, who's flown up from Melbourne. We did have a speaker from TCA, which is called Tech Council Australia. They're an amazing organisation that's recently launched, and what they're focused on at TCA is really helping the tech industry at large to drive economic growth and wealth, jobs and prosperity for the tech industry. One key thing that they recently released was some really great research about the tech industry, and most of us are part of, which highlighted the tech industry is now the third largest contributor to GDP here in Australia, which is an amazing thing to think we're all part of that economic wealth to this country. And that sort of turns me to the speakers tonight. We've got some amazing speakers here with Kathleen from Austrade and also Greg Harrison from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Now, these two people, I'm not sure if you've heard of those organisations before, but they are government organisations that are here to help, free service available, to help companies grow internationally. So what I want to start off is talking with Kathleen and Greg, and then I'll break into talking with Colin and Shannon about some other topics. So Kathleen, why don't you just give us a little bit of an example of what Austrade does as an organisation and some of the work that you're focused on?
Yeah, great, thanks. So I guess coming from startups, I didn't always know what Austrade did. So they provide services two ways. One, to companies looking to invest into Australia, and for companies looking to grow out of Australia globally. So if you're a tech company here in Australia and you want advice on how to expand into the US, how to which country go to hire staff in ASEAN, for example, Austrade can do that for you.
Hands up in the room. Did anybody know Austrade did that? Okay. Has anybody used Austrade in the past? Great. Okay. Interesting. I mean, it's astounding that an organisation's there and available for companies to be able to get this support. What are some of the exciting projects you're working on at the moment, Kathleen? Talk to us about sort of 2022.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of things happening in Australia, migration, other things like that. What are you guys doing to help?
Yeah, so there are a few big ones. So out of the last 18 months, we've done a thing around the visitor economy recovery. So tourism was one of the biggest drivers in Australia up until COVID hit. So bringing people back into Australia is a big focus. So we're promoting Australia to the world. We've been doing campaigns around that. One around bringing students back in as well. Now that they can travel, most countries can into Australia, so working around that as well. We're also doing a piece around global talent attraction. So for companies here who are finding a gap in talent, helping fast-track visas for people to come into Australia to fill those gaps is a big one as well. And then our general services as well.
Yeah, wonderful. We were just chatting out there before, and obviously with Greg sitting next to you, I wasn't sure whether New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, being a similar organisation, is either a friend or an enemy. I think we came to agree that you're a frenemy, yeah? So some of the things that you're doing, obviously here in Australia, you talked about AI, you talked about blockchain, you talked about some new things that are really, interesting. And it was interesting for me to understand the government's involved in these things. Can you share some of those things that you're involved in next year?
Yeah, sure. Greg, you might have some other ones to add to here. So we're not a policy agency. We don't advise government on things like regulatory environments around blockchain. What we can do is give commercial insights. So we do a lot of work with companies in that space, and they might say, look, we're finding it really hard to get past this particular regulatory hurdle coming into Australia, or we're really finding it hard to hire talent in this space for this area of growth. And that's where we can kind of, I guess, influence in that space.
And this is free content and data, first-party data that companies can get access to.
Absolutely. We also do snapshots on, AI in Australia right now for investors coming into Australia, as an example. So there's a lot of pieces that we do to sort of help that growth within Australia.
What's the process for me, said company, I want to get information, how do I approach Austrade? What do I actually do?
It's a good question. And there are a lot of doors into Austrade, as people would know. So you might know someone in Hong Kong and want to go to Hong Kong and speak to them directly. You might know someone who looks after the grant and go in through that door. You might go to their trade advisory online and go through that door. There are many ways into Austrade. I'm not going to tell you which way to go that suits your business, but I guess what you can do is go on and see online services and see something that helps you. You can then also connect to people directly, or if you're in market and want support, you can go directly to Austrade San Francisco, Austrade Hong Kong, wherever it might be, and find that support.
Would an easier way to put up your phone number on the slide?
Yes, you could do.
Okay, cool. We can sort that out.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, really interesting. And coming to the frenemy conversation, obviously being a Kiwi myself, living in Australia, and I'm really grateful for, what prosperity Australia's offered me as a person, for me and my family when I moved here in 2008. But, a little old country behind you there called New Zealand. Greg obviously is working for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Can you explain, some of the similarities, but also some of the differences with what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Bevan. Look, I think at heart the organisations are seeking to achieve the same thing. New Zealand Trade and Enterprise's mission is to help New Zealand companies grow bigger, better and faster for the prosperity of the country. So it's very, very targeted. And similar to Austrade, we're not a policy department. I would say we're an execution arm. A little bit dramatic. But we're here to provide support in the field for people. So New Zealand organisations who want to come into Australia, whether they be technology, food and beverage, advanced manufacturing, defence. One of the little known things is that manufacturing for defence in New Zealand is counted as 100% Australian content, because Australian defence has a problem. It hasn't got enough manufacturing. So that's one of the good things about the economic relationships between the two countries, and where cooperation really benefits both countries. So look, we will help an organisation plan its entry to Australia. We will look at market dynamics in Australia, whether that be from the distribution of opportunities from a geography perspective. What does the banking and finance industry look like? Where are there opportunities that organisations need to know about? And how do they land? How do they hire? How do they build an organisation that is straddling borders, and basically how do they succeed? It's all about helping them go faster than they may not really want to go when they first come in. But speed is critical in tech. Of course, competition is so intense. And how do we mitigate risk for them? So we're very, very hands-on. Yeah.
And Greg, you didn't admit your age to me out there, but you also said that there's about 150 years worth of experience within NZT. So
Yes,
do you wear most of that experience yourself, or is there the group?
Come on.
So how many advisors are working at NZT that can get access to all this information?
Yeah, look, across the team, we've probably got between 35 and 40 people in Australia, and they will be in the investment team in different sectors. In the tech sector, we've gone from 2.5 people 18 months ago to now 6. We expect some more heads to arrive. The number of tech companies that have come into Australia have doubled in the last 12 months. We expect them to double again in the next 12 months. In the same way that New South Wales was really, its recovery was a construction-based recovery. In New Zealand, it's been an export-led recovery. And guess what? Technology is weightless. You don't have to worry about supply chains. Mm-hmm. So, we have got people who have, like myself, 40 years in the sector, really strong sales, marketing, operational capabilities. We've got people who are very strong in tech marketing, who have owned their own businesses, run their own SaaS companies. So quite battle-hardened people who are there to make a difference for those organisations. Yeah.
And you've lived in our sort of world to a point, Greg. You work for one of New Zealand's most successful stories, being Xero. Mm-hmm. What do you see when you look at a company like Deel that sort of entered the market, that sort of, is really adding value to international hiring, expansion of business, and the conversation that you're having every day with companies in New Zealand?
Look, I think it's interesting both as a case study and also as a support to organisations. So I mentioned that we want people to be able to move fast, and I think a service like Deel removes the barrier of complexity of hiring. It also means that the geographies that people can look at for their staff are really, really opened up. And New Zealand's just the same as Australia at the moment. Getting a good technical architect, boy, they're hard to get and they're really expensive. Same thing with sales, same things with any kind of data science people. So you remove barriers, and that's really, really important. The case study is Deel started as a global company. So guys, lose your .nz, lose your .au, because you're global, because your competitors are global. Whether you like it or not, you may think you're a local SaaS company. There's no such thing. So I think there's a lot to learn from just observing how Deel has gone about building its business and its aspirations.
That's amazing. And the Nzt Business Model, Greg, again, for those that are not familiar with it, is it just localizing companies out of New Zealand into Australia? Is that the sort of the journey that you're supporting through?
Yeah, we do. So it's so generally speaking, there'll be somebody within the organisation that manages the relationship with the organisation in New Zealand. And there are people like me in many, many parts of the world, North America, Asia, Africa, Europe, Middle East. So my remit is tech companies in Australia. And whilst I sort of care what they're doing in other sectors, I've got very, very strong blinkers. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I might just pass back over to Kathleen as well. So Kathleen, Austrade's vision is obviously to look at Australian companies here. Is there also an import focus that you guys are looking to bring economic wealth into Australia that you guys support?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do foreign direct investment. So if a company's looking to set up an office in Australia to hire people, to invest in a venture capital fund, set up a site, we do all of that.
Yeah, wonderful. And what are some of the key trends or insights maybe that you've seen at the moment that Australian companies are struggling to fix or solve with their look to the international markets, and some of the advice you guys are providing?
Yeah, I guess the big thing is a lot of tech companies can get a few clients really easily. Internationally, you might have a client in Singapore, one in China, wherever it might be. But to really focus on a market and try and drill into that market is a very different process to just sort of ad hoc gaining international clients. It's really about, I guess, market sort of surveillance, really sort of knowing who your target client might be in that market. It could be very different to who it is in Australia, and thinking about how you, I guess, go about that, because the risk is that you can waste a lot of capital going about it the wrong way.
Are you seeing trends in certain markets? Obviously, companies follow the Western culture. Let's go to the UK, let's go to America. There's complexities with that. Are you starting to advise companies to think into different markets where different talent pools reside?
Yeah, which we just did a census with EY, looking at fintech in Australia.
Here's the EY.
So what we found was really interesting is that fintechs in Australia, I think it's a matured sort of sector compared to, say, a few years ago. So you asked, I think, some companies maybe 3 or 4 years ago, whatever were being Singapore, UK, US, and this will be markets, but there's a lot more interest in Southeast Asia now. So a lot of our companies are looking at Indonesia, they're looking at Vietnam, they're thinking about other markets outside of those big Western markets, I think. It's quite interesting.
And the challenges that they're all facing is, where do I find people, how do I find people, and how do I set up? Are those the questions you're trying to help them answer?
Yeah, regulatory, how do I go through the hurdles of that? Yeah, how do I find people? Where do I set up? How do I grow?
So maybe giving my phone number to those companies would be a good idea as well, yeah?
Good help, definitely.
Hey, look, I really appreciate all that insight. And this is amazing to be able to connect to government in a way that, I suppose I never really thought of, because, I've been an entrepreneur myself. I want to start my business. I would just go out there and forge ahead. But to know there's free advice connected on the back of, EY's insights and data that companies can get access to, it's a pretty amazing service that you provide. I really appreciate you coming tonight and sharing those thoughts with us. I'm going to move over to Colin now. So Colin's our import on the back of obviously Rihanna, who's from TCA, that couldn't join us tonight just because of some flu-like symptoms. I think she's COVID negative from what she was saying, but anyway, she didn't want to risk it. So thanks for joining us tonight, Colin. Colin's the recruiter.
And the backup.
I pause at recruiter because I lived in this world for the last 15 years, and me and Colin share some very similar interests. So there's a good recruiter story and there's always a bad recruiter story. You've all got it, I'm sure. Colin's definitely one of the good guys out there. So we're very fortunate to have you here today, Colin. But going back to the guys that we had on the panel earlier, ATS system, Michael and the team, they're all about talent attraction. You're all about finding the talent. Last 2 years, we've probably seen the toughest market conditions for finding talent. Last year, every company was getting rid of people, didn't want to hire. This year, every company's hiring not enough people to hire. How's your organisation facing those challenges as a recruitment organisation?
I'll be honest, it's actually been quite interesting, and it comes down to some of the insights that I've actually also sourced from EY, from McKinsey and from Boston Consulting Group around what have been some of the changes. In terms of finding talent, I actually don't think it's been that difficult. What I found interesting is how companies are now going about doing it. And I'll give everyone an example. Last year, Taiwan was the global leader in handling COVID. They didn't use lockdown whatsoever. In Asia Pacific, there were several other examples. Hong Kong did extremely well. Singapore did extremely well. South Korea did extremely well. In America, it was Texas and Florida. UAE did very well. Berlin did very well. And these economies were very richly rewarded with a ton of global companies now looking at setting up and investing in them. So whereas I previously would have just been recruiting in Australia, now I'm being asked by both Australian companies as well as Israeli tech startups and US tech startups, can you help us to enter new markets? And that with itself comes a series of unique challenges. Now, I have to say, one of the most brilliant experiences of working as a partner to Deel is it taught me what I would describe to be the gold standard playbook for a company entering a new market. And that is start with a leader which understands sales, partnerships, marketing, as well as PR. Because once you can get the four of those in place, it becomes a lot easier to grow. So whilst the last 2 years have been challenging in a sense, it's also presented some tremendous opportunities for global expansion, which is also how I kicked off my relationship with Deel, who I love beyond words, and I think they're an absolutely amazing company. So there's certainly been challenges, but some of the opportunities have been incredible, and I don't think that there's ever been an opportunity or a time to start thinking global.
So Nzt Group's an organisation that you founded 8-9 years ago and been very successful working within the Australian marketplace. When did it change for you guys as owners and directors of the company to start thinking more global with your talent attraction and supporting your companies in that approach to global?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
So I would say that it started about 7 years ago with the realization that Singapore is probably the tech hub for about 70% of APAC tech businesses. Hong Kong, especially for financial technology. Sydney probably gets more than Melbourne, but I'd definitely say it's when we started going through lockdowns that as a result of necessity, that we started taking much more of a global view and then just following global trends around who was doing it well and who's being very, very richly rewarded for it. So in the last 2 years, we've gone global as opposed to just focusing on the Australian marketplace.
So Nzt Group's business model has been going global. Any company comes to you and talks to you about hiring in all different jurisdictions, you can now offer some talent attraction support, but also now with the partnership deal, you can help them onboard and payroll them as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. It's an amazing value proposition. I'm an advisor to Stone & Chalk, so I love being involved with an Australian tech startup ecosystem. I think there's some amazing companies that have been launched from here. One of the challenges that I've seen, at least that Australian companies have in their mind, is they just don't know how to do it, which is why I commend the job that you do. I think Austrade is an incredible organization. But we've been able to package that up for Australian companies. Like we work with Austrade, we work with Invest Victoria, Global Victoria, the Treasury of New South Wales. This is how you do it. This is the government support that you can leverage. And this is what my cumulative experience has taught me around the gold standard risk minimization approach for an Australian tech company to scale globally, as well as an Israeli or an American company to enter the Asia Pacific market.
Sounds like you should be working for us.
Sounds like I should be.
You're hired.
You take the recruiter out of recruitment, but you can't take it.
It's inspiring to hear that. I mean, it's from a business owner's perspective, and again, I've lived in recruitment land and I've faced the challenges obviously you've faced. But I always had a think local, act global approach to the way I was thinking to support my clients, and I suppose now you've taken on that approach with your organisation. Let's come back to the great resignation, insecure workers, all these headlines that we talked about earlier, Shannon talked about earlier. You're in the recruitment game, you're in the weeds. Companies are coming to you. There's senior leaders in this business say that are looking to hire, desperate to hire people. How are you helping them solve those problems?
With some companies, with all companies, you need to coach them. You need to tell them what you're seeing. You need to tell them the global trends. And in many circumstances, you need to be able to guide them to levels of change. For example, if a company 5 years ago, nobody offered remote work. Now, you don't really have a chance of attracting talent if you don't offer some element of remote work. 5 years ago, you and I would have seen this. We would have thought that we need to build a recruitment business just in Melbourne. And then as the next step, we would expand to Sydney. You don't need to do that anymore. With the advent of Zoom and various productivity tools such as Asana, Trello, or Monday.com, it's never been easier to actually take on a global model, but do that right from the get-go. That's what I've seen.
That's amazing. I mean, it really is amazing to think that you can set up a company in Australia, New Zealand, and overnight tap into that global marketplace where there's either talent to help you scale and grow, or commercial markets to help you set up new supply chains. So this is the new world we are living in. Guys, there's some really intelligent people in this room, and I'm sure you've all got some potential questions to ask. So I might just hand over to anybody here if you feel like asking a question to the panelists. Is there anybody here?
So Colin, I mean, there's a couple of problems that we're solving here. One is, how do I engage people as an organisation that's trying to grow? I'm looking for talent overseas. If I'm an Australian organisation, I go to you guys. But then you'll be conservative in terms of who you recommend. You'll say that there's a range of organisations that can help you. So Shannon's sitting here saying, okay, we can help you in terms of the compliance area. How do I find those people? Isn't it like there's a chain of events here? I need to find them, I need to source them. Once I've sourced them, I can engage them.
Yeah.
And we're hoping people like Austrade will say, this is the sort of organisations that you can rely on.
Yeah.
Is that true? And how do I find someone in Eastern Europe? I know the labour arbitrage is really attractive.
Yeah.
But how do I go and find that person? Do I look at sort of local job boards?
Yeah.
Do I organise relationships with people like yourself? And then do you bring me into a relationship with you that says, yeah, we can handle that now? So how does that all work? And is that just an ecosystem that's starting to build?
Without pitching my services, we haven't spoken to the only member of the panel which actually speaks Russian as a second language.
Okay, let's take Russian out of the equation for now. Including Ukraine.
Look, let me give you an example if you're looking for a leader in that region. The playbook to follow if you're an Australian tech startup or just a global tech startup is you look at a market, whether it be Ukraine or a Romania, which has now got a very highly developed tech sector as a result of UiPath. And what you need to find as a gold standard is somebody who's done this for a tech startup before. You need to find that tech startup launch experience. There's actually an entire profession now called the launch manager or an expansion manager that has experience across those 4 skill sets that I mentioned before: sales, partnerships, marketing, and PR. That's what you need to look for. If you work with a recruiter, it will probably make it easier, although that was never my intent. But something else which I wanted to mention, and it's interesting that you mentioned Eastern Europe. I openly advise my clients, if you're looking at hiring technical staff, look at Eastern Europe. In Ukraine, you have some of the most brilliant data scientists on the planet that are paid at pigeons compared to here, but you're getting someone who is a bona fide genius with their 12 degrees, not 12 degrees, but as an example, and they learn English from high school. I still recommend using some sort of a localization partner, whether it be an agency or some type of partner to at least help you vet, particularly if there is that language issue. But the value chain is, speaking with an Austrade, they're absolutely brilliant. Deel will also assist you in terms of bringing that person on board. And just so you know, one of the major Australian banks has done exactly the same. when they could not find artificial intelligence developers here in Australia, they hired them in the Ukraine, and once the borders are going to be opening up and you can bring people over, then they can get them over. But
do they want to get them over? Because you lose the labour arbitrage there, right? So is this an ecosystem that's starting to build, and is this why we're all excited about it? Is because you can pay these people far more than they would actually get paid domestically, right? But they still have the luxury of living within their own country and enjoying everything. They don't need to move their family here to enjoy those sorts of things, but everyone wins. Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, it's giving people the option. So here's the thing. If you were to hire someone to work essentially as an island, as being the sole person in a region, something that people find quite attractive is to then have the option that if I did want to move across from a Russia or a Belarus, to have the option of going into Australia. Most people don't end up taking it because they've got their roots bedded down there. But it's just like offering remote work. When companies do it, you're richly rewarded by more talent coming across and saying yes. By giving people the option that, hey, if you decide that Ukrainian food sucks, which it does, I'm Ukrainian half, so I can say that, then here's a pathway which you can do. But honestly, it's the way the world is going, and as another shameless plug, these guys are very instrumental in actually causing that.
That's cool.
I think there's another element to that, Richard, which I'm starting to do a lot of research on myself, which is what does remote work look like for every organisation? And if you jump on LinkedIn and just go remote jobs worldwide, there's about 844,000 jobs currently listed on LinkedIn, which tells you companies are thinking remote first when they're hitting job ad. I want to advertise a job in a remote first world. But to candidates that are applying for these jobs, what does that actually mean? Does it mean I'm working at the beaches of northern Sydney? Does it mean I'm working in regional Victoria? Or does it mean I'm working in Ukraine? So I think until companies really explain on the job ad what remote first actually works means to candidates, then we're sort of in this sort of early phase of what does remote first work mean. And I think there's another layer to that, which is we've got a wonderful person here that's worked in international mobility. International mobility is something I've never really heard of. And EY and PwC and all these organisations make billions of dollars on providing advice for companies to look at moving people from one place to the next. But what we're starting to see is tech and innovation start to think about international mobility as a first hire just as much as the sales and marketing commercial teams, because they are thinking global from day one. So international mobility is starting to become a role. We're starting to see companies that we're talking to saying, hey, we've got these people in our business that are helping move people and also their pets from country to country, because we're now thinking remote first for everything we're doing. So that's sort of my view on it at the moment. We're still very early.
Yeah.
Brad. Shannon, Deel's been in Australia for how long?
5 months.
5 months. So
yeah.
in the last 5 months, you said you've signed up 100 customers. Like, what's the best story you've heard out of those 100?
That's a good question.
Like financial return sort of thing.
Financial return?
Yeah.
If you're going to an ROI on hiring an employer of record versus setting up an entity, it's a difficult one because each country is different. The amount of time taken to set up an entity is taken into account, the cost of it. I'd say, over the past week or so, what's been great is we've signed up the fastest e-bike company in the world, fastest growing e-bike company in Australia.
Sorry, who's that?
Zumo.
Okay.
The fastest non-alcoholic beverage company. Some of you tonight have drank some of their drinks, Liars. Valued at $500 million in 2.5 years. And Mycelium Ventures as well. Amazing companies. And also SwiftX, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in Australia. So I think whilst you can't do an ROI on, setting up an entity versus hiring by EOR, I think those are success stories and a credit to what we're doing here at Deel in Australia. It is a difficult time and uncertain period, and companies are trying to navigate through a world where the future is unknown and unclear.
Yeah.
And we provide them with a simple solution to scale into new markets quickly. Yeah.
Sorry, so you gave those 3 companies as an example.
Yeah.
Why do they want to use you guys?
A few different reasons. I think because first, we provide employer of record on a platform. So companies can hire full-time employees anywhere in the world within minutes on Deel.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is a part of the brief has been for some of these companies a global payroll stack that consolidates, because when a company expands around the world, typically they use vendor A in country A, vendor B in country B, vendor C. What that means, different commercial models, different points of contact, different time zones to deal with. And they're very much searching for a solution that will consolidate the stack. And whilst we don't have it in place right now, we're very excited about the launch of our global payroll solution that's coming in the future. Who knows when it's going to launch? We've been told it's Q1 next year. It could be later than that. But coming from an international payments background, I know how complex payment ecosystems can be around the world. So I think those are the reasons. The other reason is we're available. What I mean by that is some of the guys in my team spent countless hours working with the likes of Lies, the likes of Morse Micro, 10, 12 o'clock at night. And that is value that you're delivering before a company embarks on their international hiring plan. Lies, for example, recently went through a $90 million funding round. Okay? They're very much super scale mode right now. And we caught them 3 months ago. And over the 3-month period, we've been able to deliver value of being up late at night, responding to questions or queries within 30 minutes. And over that period, we were able to win the RFP and to be their preferred partner as they scale globally. So I think there's a combination of factors here.
There's another element to that. We had a meeting with the CEO of Lies, fascinating guy, involved in a number of different businesses, but his approach to his business was, and I asked him the question, I said, hey, any non-alcoholic beverage company would normally sell to a company like breweries or something like that to get scale. That's how those businesses scale. And he said, no, we're going to open our business up in 120 countries. We're going to run it ourselves. We give them that option to be able to create that, retain margin, move into new markets, go global overnight. And is the way that he talked about setting up a fully distributed organization, that was his first thought. He didn't think any other way of doing it. So I think, when businesses get to a certain point in local markets, Australia, New Zealand, and then somebody comes in and says, oh, I'm going to buy that and take it global, founders get caught up in the money. This guy wants to run his business from a global perspective. He wants to take it to the world. And you can't take that away from a founder, can you?
No, absolutely. So I've just got one more question. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to monopolize this. So you've got, I've had to set up a business in the US before. Do you do different states? Do you cater to the different states' regulations within the US and other countries for that?
Yeah, look, the interesting thing about the US is every state is different.
Yeah.
So we've had situations where a company will scale into California, for example, set up the entity there, but then want to hire someone from Arizona. The labor law in Arizona is different. The good thing about Deel, we're established in Delaware. We have coverage across all US states. Canada is the same. New South Wales and Australia is the same. Each state in Australia has its own labor law, has its own mandatory costs that are required by law. We are compliant across all states in the US, Canada.
All 50.
All 50.
Okay.
So this allows a company to scale seamlessly into a country. They might set up shop in the US, they might set up shop in California. They want to engage talents across the US, Europe, wherever it might be. We have the infrastructure for them to be able to do that.
Excellent.
Thanks for your questions, Brad. Anything else anybody wants to ask a question around? Yes?
I was just, it was more of a question of opinion, we've gone through an experience where we have 3 entities in 3 different countries, Ukraine, US and Australia.
Yeah.
And that's allowed us to, we've struggled to hire people in Australia, for example, because the skills just aren't there. So it's allowed us to expand the US and Ukraine, but even then, the skills aren't in those countries. So I think, what's your thoughts around the difference between, I guess, trying to hire where you've got this group of people versus having sort of lone agent because the skill shortage exists and you can't find them elsewhere. That's one thing we've struggled with is, how do you keep them connected to the company, or do you go for skills and so you kind of you weigh up 2 candidates. One might be more skilled, but the other one lives 5 minutes down the road from another employee.
Interesting one.
That is a good question.
It's a really interesting one because I think, coming back to Richard's question, we're in this sort of, new world of, access to talent. There's always been a really challenging situation between said business, I want to hire a salesperson, I'll go to a recruitment company, they'll have a process they run, I've got to wait for that process. They'll throw me a few people and I don't like any of them and I'll try to do it myself. So the skills gap has always been there. The talent shortage has always been there. It's just been highlighted more so because of COVID, because of the border closures, things like that. So I think what we're trying to do at Deel is try and create a connected economy across both the payroll side of things. Okay, we can help you payroll them. But furthermore, how do we create a connected talent community? So you as a company that goes, okay, I want to go to Ukraine on advice from Austrade or New Zealand Trade Enterprise, whatever they say, or EY, you can come to us first and we can say, okay, here's what salaries look like in that country, here's what you need to do to be able to hire them, and here's the talent community to connect and find those people as well. And I think that's the missing piece that recruitment agencies, BPOs, outsourcing organisations, our own networks are really struggling to try and bind together at the moment. Somebody solves that, we'll make sure that money. LinkedIn's done a great job creating a global community of talent, 790 million plus people, but it's unvetted talent. It's unverified. People have created their own brands, their own profiles. Half of it's not what they do versus what they do. So I think somebody needs to create something that can vet all of that global talent into a consumable sort of access point for businesses. That's my thoughts on it. Anybody else?
Yeah, look, I think it depends on the nature of the role. The reality is that tenure is shrinking measurably each year. So if you want to hire an SDR, for instance, what's the tenure? 17 months or so?
Yeah, I'd say
If you're up
8 months. 12 months for Betty.
Yes. So, you've got to have a realistic expectation of, even if you hire somebody locally, what's the chances of them being around in 12 to 24 months or something like that? Now, then that opens up the question of culture and how you value people. And that needs to be constant no matter where you are. Because if people are working remotely in Broken Hill or Boston, they're remote. So it really falls to the company to make sure that the culture of engagement of its staff and the way they value the staff, the way they measure the staff, the way they give people the ability to contribute to the vision of the organisation, that's not a geography thing. So
I think companies need to be comfortable that tenure is not the holy grail of the organisation. Be comfortable that people want to work in projects now. Younger people coming through, they're not really tied to a corporation, like a linear career path, start here, grow myself to wherever I might get to in the next 15 years. I mean, that's what I grew up with, because that's what I was trained to do. But younger people think about their careers as projects. So companies need to accept that, hey, an SDR, if I'm getting for 8 months, I need to develop them or hand them over and get somebody else, and create structures around churn that support your business.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've been on this journey myself. We started Deel 5 months ago here. I was the first employee. I hired everyone remotely. I met some of the team for the first time today. And I think culture is very much of being connected to the overarching vision, and being connected to the team is very much top down but bottom up. Everyone contributes, and every day, we catch up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and every day at 4:30 in the afternoon we catch up again. And I think that being available for your team, letting them know that you've got their best interests at heart, is super critical. Location doesn't matter. We're living in this remote world where people are hiring people from all over the place. It's a culture thing. You've got to take a look at what the culture is for your organisation and control that. Top down, bottom up. Everyone contributes. And as a follow-up to that, tomorrow morning we're going to meet at WeWork in Sydney. We're doing a culture session. Okay, I've met some of these guys for the first time, but I want everyone to contribute to the culture because it's a collective effort. So that's my perspective.
Can I say that, Shannon? I mean, it's undeniable though that the environment in which we lived for the last 2 years has expedited the principles of remote working, which is why it's about timing. And I think with respect to Deel, the timing was tremendous, because they had a runway and then we had a global pandemic upon which technology, both the sophistication of the technology and the necessity to adopt that technology right across the world, has transformed our principles about what it means to actually remote work. Right? We've had 2 years of the necessity to Teams, to Zoom, and everything else. So top down, bottom up, 100% strong management philosophies, but the principles of doing that on a remote environment, people are no longer scared of hiring people in the Ukraine.
That's right.
Right? They're sitting there saying, I've been doing this for 2 years, so why can't I now open up the globe to the talent pool? I think that's the really exciting thing.
Just on the back of that, I wanted to ask, Austrade, is your business sort of approach changing as well in adaptation to that from Australian businesses out globally?
Look, I mean, we're not going to tell you which country to hire somebody from.
No, that's
It doesn't matter.
So that's the point. You've got offices around the world.
Yeah, 80 offices globally. So, sorry, 80 countries, I should say, not 80 offices. So
does that change the business model that you've been doing, or are you reviewing a business model as well? You mentioned 120 country scale out. How would Austrade traditionally have handled that? You would have been going, okay, we're going to these 80, that's what we can deal with. Yeah, what's the change there at Austrade, or no change?
I guess similar to a lot of companies here, we've had to pivot pretty quickly. So we used to do a lot of very traditional business missions. So you take 10 companies from Australia and you go to the UAE for 10 days to look at manufacturing or setting up offices there or whatever it might be. And you do some meetings, and it's all in person, and then you come home, and it's a nice trip, and that's kind of how it goes. You can't do that during a pandemic, as you pointed out. So it's been a lot of working with partners, I guess, like we're here tonight, working to sort of deliver virtual services, really, I guess, a lot of people who are already in market. So if we actually had a company who were trying to close a deal with an insurance partner in a market, they couldn't get into that market because it was closed borders, but they could, I guess, have us there supporting them a bit more. So that was really helpful. Or helping them look at locations set up, for example. So there's been, I guess, that sort of leaning on people who are in the market, and also virtual delivery. So all of our services now that used to be in market are now also available virtually or recorded online. I guess similar to you, probably, Greg?
Yeah, we need to do a lot more one-to-many events just because of the scale of new customers coming in, because of the pragmatic things of travel. So a lot more use of digital technologies, but fundamentally, because the mission hasn't changed, it's just where you need to continue, like any agile organisation needs to continue to look and say, well, what do we need to do differently next year in order to go faster, go harder? So COVID's been really good because it's forced this abrupt, I think we've all pivoted so many times. I think now it's a pirouette.
Do you also find, I was in a conference, APAC conference, pretty much anyone in tech has exploded during the pandemic. Have you noticed that you've got technology in brackets in your role at Austrade? Are you guys being challenged by the rapid growth and going exactly what you just said of, we're not talking about Australia anymore and New Zealand, even APAC? We've heard Ukraine mentioned more than Southeast Asia tonight.
Yeah, that's true.
Are you being challenged in that regard? Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I advise technology companies. I'm by no means a technology expert. I just want to make sure clear. So we have clients like Zoomer, who you mentioned before, who we've been advising on different markets, for example, helping them do market assessments on where to look at. I guess some of them exploded. So, online delivery has been a big thing. So they've exploded in growth. Companies who are offering solutions around HR or around even to do, I guess, collaboration online really have grown. We also do a lot of things in ag, which has been obviously really strong, particularly in wine, for example. So it's been quite interesting seeing the different changes, I guess, across industries during the last 18 months. I'm not sure if what's happening in that one.
Actually, an interesting observation that I found, and I have to admit, I work a lot closer with the Treasury of New South Wales and West Victoria, and I do work with Austrade. But one thing which they're still grappling with is historically would have been, hey, come to Sydney, we'll give you some space in the Atlassian building. I know that the Treasury of New South Wales offered an incentive where if you're going to hire 20 people, they'll give you that space for free. Whereas, well, what if we're going to do a remote? What if we just want to come to Australia in general? So it's something more which the states are grappling with, where historically you'd have a hub out of Victoria or out of New South Wales, whereas, well, we're interested in Australia as a whole. We don't necessarily care where it is. So I'd like to know from you, how is Austrade dealing with this?
I guess the good thing about being federal is that we don't favour a child, so we can offer any state. That's okay. I've lived in Melbourne, I lived in Sydney. I love both for different reasons. So try to be, yeah, but much harder for other states. And I guess it's an interesting one for companies to grapple with. I guess even with investment into Australia, how do you sort of pitch Australia as a whole? You know, given that now it's not like one city particularly over another, so it's really interesting times.
Guys, I know, just in general, tech's obviously adopted this global first workforce and been the first out of the gate with it. But, we've talked about Zuma, it's a bike fleet company. We've talked about Liars, it's a non-alcoholic beverage company. So it sounds to me, and again, question potentially for you and Greg, are you starting to see more companies think more like technology companies now in the way that they're operating? Yeah?
That one.
Show me a manufacturing company that doesn't have fully automated design and production. I'll show you a dead company.
Yeah.
So tech is no longer tech. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
This is one message. Tech is not a thing. Okay. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And when some of us have grandchildren, all they know is this world of tech. Tech is meaningless to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for all companies, it's this going digital is one of the biggest silly things ever, because that's the website. No, it's the entire infrastructure of your organization to be able to build a single data model that connects to APIs internally to your customers, to your partners, to government and other regulators. So without technology, you will not trade, full stop. There are very, very few companies that can actually survive without the intelligent use of technology. You take any manufacturer, do they need to hire people? I think so. So, yeah.
And to be honest, I would second that in the age of automation. 4 years ago, we said that blockchain would be the most disruptive area of technology, and as much money as you can make in speculating on it, I've actually found that it's artificial intelligence that's changed the world. And when artificial intelligence started becoming embedded in verticals where you never would have thought of technology, in the design of various treatments for illnesses, in biochemistry, in supply chain, in manufacturing, it's created a lot of new jobs. There have been a lot of jobs which have been made redundant, but the fact is, tech is genuinely in everything, and technological advancements such as artificial intelligence are driving the next generation of cutting-edge innovations and outcomes right across the world. And something that if companies aren't doing it, I completely agree with you. I simply don't know how that will exist.
Guys, I think we'll end it there. It sounds like robots are taking our jobs. So, look, to wrap up for the night, thank you everybody for your wisdom and value. Again, it's great to introduce businesses or organisations like Austrade and New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. We're really keen to forge our partnership further with you guys, and Kathleen, I'll definitely make sure all the clients have my number. But yeah, look, I really want to thank everybody that's come here tonight. Tonight was not about Deel. It was really about sharing the journey that we're involved in. We're really involved in helping companies think global with their approach, and we've been fortunate here to be able to support some amazing Australian companies. So thank you for coming tonight and celebrating Deel's official Australian launch party, and we hope to see you all soon.
Yeah.